teaching culminating project. Ta-da! Okay, so just a general area focus and kind of where we're headed is where really this is all about. It's all about teaching young children to read fluently, because that's been one of the primary research driven. It's been one of the primary focuses of elementary school teachers. Like teaching kids to read has been shown as it's like the biggest predictor of future success in school. And because of that, we've got a lot of reading interventions that we then implement just to help struggling students who are not able to read at grade level and just need some supplementary type of education. And another area where we're kind of focusing on this is this thing called reader self-perception. And a reader's self-perception, it's really just defined as the way a student feels about himself as a reader. It really is as general as that. It doesn't actually have to do with like the specific reading ability. It really is just a feeling, like how well they think they read. And it's a little bit different from self-efficacy, where self-efficacy is whether or not a person's belief about whether or not they can actually accomplish something. So it could be kind of broad and kind of labeled for anything. But reader self-perception is really just how the reader feels about themselves. So it's kind of a term I really wasn't familiar with until I started doing this research. But the reader self-perception, and this has all been shown through research, is that the reader self-perception and a student's feelings of self-efficacy have a pretty significant effect on their academic success. So because it does have this very, very direct link, this research-proven link between all three of these things, this study of reader self-perception, that's why it's something that's kind of begun to be researched more in the last decade or so.
Okay.
So, and then more specifically, these reading interventions that we're implementing for struggling students, they have to have some sort of effect on them. So that's what we're looking at, or what I was looking at, is how do these reading interventions actually affect the reader self-perception, how they actually feel about themselves as readers, if it affects them at all.
Okay.
So, yeah, so that's what I was looking at. That's just a general kind of area where I was looking. My specific research question is, what is the effect of the 6-minute solution on students' reader self-perception? The 6-minute solution is a reading intervention. It's just based on repeated readings of some real high interest type literature. They're all excerpts from pretty interesting stuff. There's a lot of like astronauts and just stuff that kids would find interesting. And the 6-minute solution really focuses on words read correctly per minute. It's focusing more on speed and fluency, with the hope that as the students are beginning to focus less and less on the actual decoding of the word, that comprehension will follow. So the 6-minute solution is focusing on that, and we're seeing how that is affecting their self-perception. And then just kind of a more general research question, does placing students in these reading interventions, does it affect their reader self-perception at all? And I really didn't find any research when I was looking around about this specific type question. Personally, I thought it would, because I always felt like students always, like, they know, whatever group they're in, they know why they're in that group. Like, even at a young age, they know what's going on. So, so I wanted to see how that actually affected them. Okay. So as far as a review of the literature that, of all the current and really kind of old research about this specific subject, I boil down just to a few main points. So we're pretty close to what we were talking about. So the need to create fluent readers. Again, that's research-based goal. That's one of the primary objectives, especially in elementary education, is to create fluent readers, because it affects everything, every aspect of their education. And again, really, this is almost word for word what the area of focus was, is that, this reading interventions for struggling readers, all these struggling readers have these feelings of self-efficacy and self-perception, and we know that they are affecting student achievement. So I want to know exactly how,
Okay.
yeah. So how we're actually going to go about doing that is I have a small group of students that I actually did my student teaching with in San Diego, and they were placed together because they were all struggling academically, like across the board, not just with reading, but really with everything. So the school district there, they wanted to implement the 6-minute solution about 6 months. And the way that we're actually going to measure whether or not their reader self-perception changes is using something called a reader self-perception scale. And the actual scale itself, well, I'll get into the more specifics about what exactly it is, but it's just a way. It's based on student responses to different questions that they kind of give you an idea of how they feel about themselves. But it's very, very specific and measured. It actually gives you like a quantifiable score, really, so that you're able to actually like assess whether or not things are changing without just going, just based on your own personal perception. So basically, that's what we're going to be doing. But again, we'll get more specific here in a second.
Okay.
So the students, they're just 16 students. It was a pretty small group, and they're all fifth grade students, boys and girls, split down the middle. The demographics were very, very typical for the San Diego school where we were. All the surrounding schools, the demographics were almost identical. And for the school itself, 85% of all the fifth graders going there were considered proficient in reading based on the California state tests, and which is a pretty good number. 85% were considered proficient. So yeah, so what it does tell us is that the school, whatever the education that they were providing and then the environment that they were providing, like the opportunities were there. And for some reason, this particular group of students was still just not able to succeed or not able to get up to proficient level based on state standards anyway. So the actual reader perception scale, it's again, now we'll get to how this actually works. It measures students' feelings about themselves. Again, it really doesn't have anything to do with reading ability. It just measures how they feel about themselves, and that particular point was pretty important. Is that we're not actually, or I wasn't actually studying whether or not they were getting any better at reading at all, or whether or not the 6-minute solution was actually working, whether or not their words per minute were increasing or not. We were just focusing on their feelings about themselves. And really, I wanted to do that because we could see that their feelings were affecting their actual student achievement. So I just wanted to focus on this one particular part. So we got this reader self-perception scale. Again, we'll break that down here in just a second. It was administered before and after the reading intervention. So in January, right after winter break, and then June, right before, about 3 weeks before school actually got out. And just because the reader self-perception scale, it has a scoring sheet, so all your data is quantifiable, and you can categorize it into a few different ways. So it's based on 33 questions, and it's just whether or not they agree or disagree with a particular statement. So when you actually administer it to the class, to explain it, you give them like a sample question. It's just a statement. It says, "I like pepperoni pizza," and students, they either agree with it or strongly agree with it. Or, there's always the undecided, kind of that middle of the road, can't come up with an answer type of answer. And then there's like, I disagree, and then I strongly disagree. So we got 5 different answers, from strongly disagree all the way up to strongly agree for each particular question. And so they were broken down in these 4, all the responses were categorized into these 4 categories. Progress was the first one, and it just So these statements showed whether or not how the students felt they were progressing compared to their peers. So it asked, for example, one question or one statement was, when I read, I don't have to try as hard as I used to. So that student would either strongly agree with that, say, yeah, I don't have to try as hard, I'm getting better. Or they could strongly disagree and say, oh, I'm having to work like crazy. Another progress question was, I read faster than I could before. Again, very, very simple statements they either agree with or disagree with. And progress was just, just comparing themselves to themselves, whether or not they feel like they're getting any better with anything. Observational comparison was how they felt, comparing to their peers. One statement was, I read faster than other kids. Another one was, when I read, I can figure out words better than other kids. So again, just real general statements about how they feel they're kind of measuring up to the peers around them. The social feedback, which I think as a teacher, I thought was pretty interesting. It was how the student feels their teachers feel about them, or how their parents feel about them. Like one question was, my teacher thinks my reading is fine. They would either agree with that or disagree with that. And really, and this one has direct input from things that are actually said to the students, to indirect input like how they're interpreting your body language. Like, I mean, it could be anything for this one. Another question for social feedback was, people in my family think I read pretty well. And then the last one, physiological states. It's just it's their internal feelings when they read. Like one question was, I feel calm when I read. And another one was, reading makes me feel good. And it really is just kind of their internal beliefs or feelings about what they feel when they read. And I'll have to send you a copy of it maybe. All the questions were pretty interesting, I thought. And kind of reading how the students actually responded to them was, I mean, some of it was kind of cool and some of it was kind of sad, Hey, it really kind of was. I mean, these particular students, they, I didn't feel like they would be very positive about themselves, and but they were still young. They ended up being a little more positive than I thought they would be. So yeah. But that's the instrument that we're using to do this. And so with that, every single question, those 5 different responses, it has a point value. Like strongly disagree is 1 point, and then all the way up to strongly agree was 5 points. So all the questions are jumbled together, and then at the end, you get the scoring sheet, and then they get a particular score for each one of those scales. And then the research who actually put this together, they have normed data that they used, and I think that was just shy of 500 different 5th grade students that they collected data from, and then from that data they created averages, and that way that when you actually score, there's like a low and an average and a high category for each one of these scales, for each for progress, observational comparison, social feedback, and physiological states. So just to make it all very quantifiable, so you could actually see some change. So that's the actual scale we're using. It's that reader self-perception scale, just how they feel about themselves. And then once we get all that data, we'll have these raw scores, which will just numbers at that point. And but we'll have a scoring sheet that I'll be able to interpret them and be able to put them either low, average, or high categories for each one of those. And really, I'm just looking for changes. Change is really all I care about. If they start low or they start high, it doesn't really matter for the purpose of this. I just care about change. And then looking at those changes, look for maybe class-wide trends, or the number of students who were in the low category versus, and at the pre-assessment and then the post, see how many are still in the low category, or whether the class has moved up different proportions for each category in the scale. There's just a lot of stuff to look at. But after getting it all, I think I organized it pretty well, and you can see how the numbers are kind of shifting around within each one of those.
Okay.
Here's my obligatory slide. It says it's all this is being done just during normal school hours. So this isn't affecting their actual education or school at all. You have to put this in there. Blah blah blah. And then just limitations. It's just some obvious limitations to this study is that all of this is just based on self-perception. These are all just feelings of 9 and 10-year-old kids. And with the number of factors that can affect that, to solely say that the change in this was because of this little 6-minute solution, we wouldn't actually be able to say that, which is still fine because we're still studying the change and how it's how self-perception is still linked to academic achievement. So even though we won't be able to 100% say it's because of this, it's still worthwhile to see that it might be changing, and we can look more in the future about kind of narrowing down exactly how they're changing. So all right, so to the actual data. So I said there were 4 measurable scales, the progress and the other 3, and then there was one question that started out, and that one was all by itself, and it was just one single question. It said, "I am a good reader." That's all it said. It was the first question, and then they answered. Then they answered, with the same scale: strongly disagree, all the way up to strongly agree, and the way that it's scored is a 1. A 1 is strongly disagree, and a 5 is strongly agree. So, and then a 3 is just going to be right in the middle of the road. So, obviously we're just looking at student numbers because we're not putting names in there. So, you look down, there's a lot of 3s and 4s, even a couple 5s. So despite the fact that they are a group of really, really struggling readers, on the whole, they seem to be kind of positive about themselves. Well, they respond positively anyway, and most of them stayed the same. And really, this was just one question, and one student did actually answer a little bit lower after it was all done. They changed that student 15 down there in the bottom. He did agree. He thought he was a good reader, or she thought she was a good reader, but did go down a little bit. But again, this was just one question. Not a lot of changes. But for the progress scale, again, this is about a fourth of the entire questionnaire. You can see for the initial survey, the vast majority were average. They fell in that average category. So they just thought they were doing okay, and 3 of them were in the low, which they felt personally that they just were not doing very well and weren't getting it. And only one of the students felt like they were really doing well. And in June, after this was all over, you could see that the average category, it went down because 4 more students have moved all the way up into the high category, where they're feeling very, very positive about whatever it is they're doing in school, and one fewer student, or one less student actually had a low, is in the low category for progress. So you can see just kind of a general trending of upwards, which is is good. It's not a huge change, but we're only talking about 16 students, so I think that shift I thought was pretty positive. And so that is just for the progress scale, though. Just comparing comparing themselves to themselves. Sorry, I don't know what that is. Just ignore the dinging. So for the observational comparison, this is how now they're just comparing themselves to others. In the beginning, again, not surprisingly, most of them are pretty average, and 4 of them are outright low. They just really, in most of the questions, they just are pretty blatant. We know that we're below or behind everybody else, and only 2 of them thought that they were kind of on par with their peers. And yeah, and then in the final survey, again, not a dramatic change, but still kind of a general shifting upwards toward toward that high category. Only one student outright feels, that he or she is way behind her peers, but so yeah, not a huge change, but they're kind of generally shifting upwards. For the social feedback, again, this is direct, indirect feedback from teachers, family, peers, preacher, whatever, whoever talks to them about reading at all, or whether or not they're doing well. This is a very, very broad category. At the beginning, not so great. In fact, not one student actually thought that they were getting a lot of really positive feedback from everybody around them.
Mm-hmm.
Which I thought was kind of sad.
That is kind of sad.
Yeah. And then 2 out of the 16 just outright low. Feedback is just not great. And really, I mean you can't see that it changed, but like it didn't change much. I mean, at least there's only one student who outright feels that things are getting some, negative feedback, and one student feels like they're getting some actual positive feedback, but still, vast majority is still just kind of right there in the middle. So, yeah, not a lot of positive change in that one.
No.
And then let's see, the last scale is just, these are just their internal feelings. Yeah, 5 of them just had like actual negative feelings when they read. Like just reading makes them feel bad, just for whatever reason. Maybe it's just, I don't know. Really, this could be just 100 different reasons why. It could just be that they feel they're really bad at it. They're just not doing well, or it could be anything here. But regardless of what it is, 5 of them actually, reading makes them feel bad.
That's sad.
And yeah, it is really sad. Yeah. And I mean, at least at the conclusion, 3 of them decided that reading doesn't make them feel bad anymore. So that's some sort of progress. Again, still nothing huge. There's still only 2 up there who actually feel outright positive. Outright positive. If you look at it that way. So I don't even remember if it's the same 2 students who still feel positive about it, but the rest of them are still kind of about where they started, but maybe just a little bit more positive.
Mm-hmm.
So overall, so now I broke it down in each category, and so for general perception, 80% of that change was positive, and for each one, you can see that for each of the change that did happen in each 4 of those scales, a large majority of it was positive. I mean, we're not talking like night and day type positive, but over the course of 6 months, for whatever reason, maybe it could have been the 6-minute solution, maybe they were able to read a little bit better, but over the course of 6 months, their view of themselves as readers, it did change. And even though it didn't change drastically, the little change that they did see, it was at least positive. So yeah, so again, no huge changes, but the changes that we did see, I mean, the large majority of it was positive for all the measurable scales there.
Mm-hmm.
And again, just kind of a different way to look at what happened is that 56%, like they had a significantly positive change, which means that for at least one of the scales, they moved from a low up to an average, or from an average up to a high. That's what I considered a significant change. Was it enough to go from one category to the other?
Okay.
And so yeah, over half of them, yeah, it did actually move up in a category, and about a third of them just kind of stayed the same, and 13%, which I think was with that many students, that was actually just one student, but yeah, I don't. Again, and really, this is kind of where the limitations of the study kind of come into play, is that since this is all just based on, feelings, that it could have been a really bad day,
Yeah.
But in the same token, like that student could have had a really bad day, and some of the other students could have had a really, really good day, where they felt, a little better than usual, But that's just kind of, I don't know, it's the nature of research on emotions. It's gonna be emotional. Yeah.
Yeah, and you don't know what happened at their house the night before or that
Oh
morning.
my gosh, yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, you start looking at the things that could affect this, and that wouldn't ever end. It just kind of goes on forever. Yeah. So basic conclusions is that the majority of them do have a more positive reader self-perception, and it might just be a tiny bit more positive, but it did in fact end up being a little bit more positive. And and based on that one question at the beginning, like most students do believe they are good readers, and which, even though I, as their teacher, very briefly know that they are all struggling, like none of them are anywhere close to grade level. They're at least positive about themselves, and without that, they're not. I mean, they're just not going to get any better unless they at least have a little bit of positivity about it.
Right.
So if nothing else, at least we know that they've still got it. They're not hopeless or without hope at all. They still think they're doing all right.
Yeah.
And then in all four of those other scales, things at least increased. So that was just kind of in a nutshell what ended up happening. And then again, the limitations, of course, is that there's just a million different influences that could also affect this besides just the reading intervention that they were in. And oh goodness, yeah. Just so many factors are come into play here to really narrow it down to one specific cause. Or it would just be impossible. However, regardless of that, you could still really in any classroom, you could use that scale throughout the beginning of the year, and it's actually kind of cool. When I was teaching in Michigan, when I was kind of doing all of this and starting to put it all down on paper, after I did my research, my teaching partner there in fifth grade, she actually did this in the next year. Like we did, I had everything all set up, so I gave that to her, and she used that in her own classroom over the course of an entire year. And she we weren't really sure how exactly, like what you do with this data, how you actually use this to inform your instruction. So she didn't really even bother trying. She just just got the data, gathered it, and looked at what happened throughout her year. And kind of at the end, she was able to kind of use that data to make some actual instructional decisions at the end, about different groupings of students. Anyway, the point was that she actually used it, in her own classroom and found it kind of some valuable data. And she was able to do it at more regular intervals. So it was actually kind of cool to put it in like to an actual classroom that was hers. And let's see, other ways you could use it is if you're gonna tell students, you would never tell them, I don't think, directly what this is and the implications of it, because I think that's more knowledge than they need. But to talk, to allow students maybe to talk about like how different strengths or insecurities they have. I mean, we do this with lots of other different subjects where even students who are struggling or doing well, like just to have a little bit of camaraderie, to know that they're not all alone in this, I think could go a long way, just to make just a little bit more positivity about not positive about struggling, but just to know they're not alone, I guess. Yeah. And then since all the teachers, they all have very different styles and things like that, just to kind of if more teachers were doing that, and you were finding that teachers doing some particular type of, I don't know, instruction or program or whatever was having these large effects, just on the students' view of themselves, then I think that would be something worthwhile to look at, to study. Like, why are these teachers having these effects on students? And then further, like, how is this actually affecting the academics? Since self-perception and self-efficacy and academic achievement are all all linked together. If you can input or change one source, everything's affecting everything else as well. So anyway, so some final thoughts. Most of the change is positive, but not all of it. And but this matters. Well, I think I meant to delete that. But this matters because because they all are like research has proven that these are all connected, and it's not just in reading, but in all of it. So even though we couldn't attribute this change just to this particular reading intervention, just the fact that they did change over just the course of a few months is pretty significant, and it's something worth studying. So.
Okay.
So yeah, that's kind of the gist of it, though. Gist of my research. So here, stop. Hey.
That's interesting.
Good.
Like, I was sitting here, I was like, what if you did, like, after you're done with, like, a unit, and have the students do, like, with their pre-assessment and then, like, a post-assessment, have them take it and see how they feel about whatever it is when they do a pre-assessment, and then when they're done with it, like, how do they feel about it? Like, and see how their attitude changes, like, because we're getting ready to start fractions.
Yeah.
They love fractions.
Yeah.
Do like a, see how they feel about fractions beforehand, and how do they feel about it afterwards.
Yeah, and as I was kind of researching around, I was focusing on reading, but they actually have like some different scales set up just for math, just like this. Like people are studying the exact same thing in math as they are right here in reading, because again, math is another huge one. Like their attitude going into it, like is determining a lot.
Yep, I see it every day.
Oh yeah, I don't know why it has to be such a polarizing subject. Like it's just a subject.
But I think it's because their parents are like, I can't do this, or I sucked at math when I was in school, and so like they kind of get it in their heads. Well, their parents don't like it, and they sucked at it, so they're not gonna like it, and they're gonna suck at it too.
Oh yeah. It's not. Yeah, there aren't a lot of things that people just have like a hard, concrete idea, like I'm bad at this, and that's just the way it is forever and ever and ever. But yeah, math is definitely one. I don't know if reading is quite that concrete. Like I feel like people have an idea that like, all right, well, we can at least get a little better here or here or there. But yeah, with math, like once they're bad, then they're bad forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
And I wish with this one I could have compared it to actual academic achievement. That was part of my plan, but it's just when I ended up moving away, like the teacher who I was working with, like her mom passed away in the middle of this, so she had a long-term sub in there for a while, and just the data it was just gone. They got lost, and because it would be, I mean, that seems like a pretty obvious link to look at. That I just couldn't, but that would be interesting to see, like how with math or reading, like how closely these two are related, since they know that they are actually affecting each other, and like let's see what's actually going on. I wish I could have done that, but I just wasn't able to.
Yeah,
right.
That would be something really interesting to look at.
Yeah, it would be. I think so. But my friend who put it into her classroom, of course, we had it done in like a Google form because they were one-on-one with computers there. So it was, so they were going through and it was grading and categorizing itself, and that was really easy to do. Doing it all on paper, it took a while just for 16 students just to do it all. Because, the questions are all on those little scales, but they mix them all up, so it's not super obvious. And so you have to go through and you're like, all right, well, question 1, 7, 11, and 19 are all for the progress scales, and you have to add up those points and then it took forever. Doing it
Yeah.
on a large scale with like 60 or 70 students without technology would be tough. You just have to do something real short.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
we've got Chromebooks that we can check out on a cart now, but that's still like
Yeah.
not. I don't want to do that either.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Well, our helicopter is back, and I have to go to work now.
okay.
Yeah,
Have fun at work.
indeed. And I I do need you to fill out a little rubric. I'll email it to you tonight
Okay.
once we get all done here. It's real short, and then you can just email it back to me if you could.
Okay. I can do that.
All right, cool.
All right.
Well, thanks for tuning in.
You're welcome. Sorry for all the technical difficulties.
Yeah. I don't understand what that was.
I don't know because it's working perfectly fine on my phone, so I don't
Yeah.
know.
All right. But anyway, I'll shoot you a text. We'll figure out a weekend, probably a Saturday. We
Okay.
can drink a cup of coffee or something.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. We'll talk to you
All right.
soon. Bye.
Okay, bye.